Hi, everybody. It's Alex Jarett with Technology Executives Club. I'm really happy to introduce you to my good friend, Dr. Amit Shah. Hi, Amit. How are you?
I'm doing well, Alex. I'm glad to be here.
This is your first interview with us, and you're also joined our Board of Advisor program. We really appreciate that. And everybody, you're going to be really excited to learn about Amit, but also learn from Amit. I'm looking at your background. Of course, I know you already, but for the group, you have this company called GNS AI, which we'll
Yeah,
talk about in a minute. You're actually a PhD, you're a doctor, and you're a data scientist, and you've had some incredible background. You've been a chief AI officer. You pretty much ran the data science program over at Abbott. What is your PhD in? How did you get into data scientists? How did that all happen?
yeah. My PhD was in neural engineering. I worked on computational neuroscience of movement and basically looking at how stroke and TBI survivors can restore attention and improve stability.
Then you went into data science. So it seems like that was a natural evolution. And then now you're in AI,
Yeah.
which seems like another natural evolution.
AI is really a confluence of different disciplines, data
Uh-huh.
science, statistics, of course, knowledge engineering and workflow management. And there are a lot of parallels to neuroscience. There's a lot of crossover in terms of the techniques. They inform each other in many ways. As far as neural engineering and how that turned into data science, we worked with data. We collected data on how people
Yeah.
move and did advanced analytics and did a lot of work on clinical studies and clinical approaches to understanding confounding variables and so on. And that's what data science really is fundamentally about. It's about mapping and understanding business processes and what really drives those and how do you affect a change. I got into my PhD because I was really interested in stroke research and how the innovative technologies could be used to change health outcomes. My grandfather was
Oh,
bedridden from multiple strokes. My father is a physician and endocrinologist. Medicine has been a part of my life from day one, essentially looking at people who deal with illnesses like diabetes and chronic conditions. My mom has glaucoma and diabetes and high blood pressure. There's so many different things that can be done with the technology to improve outcomes.
it's touching that you're really involved in this. So you're a man on a mission here to use this advanced technologies to help people. So let's tie that to what you're doing now. When I look at your bio, you founded and are running this company called GNS AI.
Yeah.
And when I read it, it says that you're turning healthcare and life sciences data into predictable revenue without breaking operational compliance limits. I don't hear a lot of people putting that together except the people that are always saying, hey, don't forget about governance. Am I reading that right?
Absolutely, because just a simple error by an AI system can be catastrophic in healthcare,
Yeah.
especially with the wrong diagnosis, the wrong recommendation, or even just mishandling care transitions can cause patients to be much worse off than they would have been. So it's important to deploy AI in a meaningful way within the workflow. So you need to understand the limits of where AI works well and where it doesn't. Otherwise, there could be catastrophic loss. And so, boundary learning and boundary limits, understanding limits, has been the focus of my entire life. It's my namesake, essentially learning limits or limitless. It's inspiration from Ganesh, an epithet of Ganesh, who is the remover of obstacles. That's also why my logo is an elephant. It's an homage to that. Yeah.
Yeah. I need to come up with a mod and a logo.
Yeah, towards the mission, right? Because when you look at variability and noise, I looked at it from a motor neuroscience perspective and motor
Yeah.
control. I look at everything from a control systems framework because that's what I've learned. That's what I believe AI is really fundamentally a controller for outcomes. And you're just modifying that control to really affect a certain metric or improve a certain metric and improve a certain outcome. What I see is that a lot of it is very fragmented, especially data, the systems that you need to talk to, and then the workflows are not necessarily aligned with the technology changes to really affect that outcome. So I look at it from a very system centric point of view.
Very interesting. So why don't we move to the types of companies that you're helping and the types of executives that you're working with, and what are you actually doing to help them? What are you actually doing at GNS AI?
At GNS AI, we look at improving healthcare revenues while respecting limits by mapping out the variability and establishing boundaries so that AI operates safely and maximizes revenue and the outcomes that AI is supposed to bring.
It's so refreshing to hear a founder and CAIO talk about limits and boundaries when we're also talking about driving revenue, increasing productivity, making processes better. I don't hear that a lot. And I think it's really critical because you're talking about healthcare situations.
Yeah.
They could have just made a very bad mistake
Yeah.
because they looked up the new AI tool or whatever. To me, that's really refreshing. Give us your approach. What makes you unique and different in the way you do that? And then after that, maybe you can share some examples.
Sure. What we do is map out the variability in any workflow and that we're looking at to implement AI. Variability is the key factor that'll fundamentally break AI.
Oh,
And so we establish what's the operating condition for AI to be useful and meaningful, and how does the break crossing over that boundary actually impair operations, and what's that cost? We work with simulations and model that workflow. And then when we implement AI, we anticipate what that outcome would look like. So by looking at variability and boundaries first, we know what are the true operating conditions for AI and where it should escalate to humans. Because AI is not going to fundamentally replace all humans or anything like that. It really is about just being an effective partner to humans and in improving the mission for improved healthcare.
that's really incredible. I know with your background, you can work in a number of different industries, but you really focus right now on healthcare and life sciences. It seems like there's a million applications for this. Maybe it would help if you share a couple examples.
Start with the operational challenge, right? For instance, hospitals are inundated with patient volume and there's very few staff to support that. Your capacity is always around 95 to 100%, and that means long wait times, difficult access to care, right? We run simulations, identify those bottlenecks, and then implement automation where it makes sense to unlock some of that throughput and improve that capacity. That's one example. Another would be potentially for clinical trials, looking at site enrollment studies and understanding that clinical trials have a major difficulty in actually recruiting patients for their trials. You have site selection, which is often done by gut feel rather than data-driven
Mhm.
approaches, but that's millions of dollars down the line if you actually fail to enroll enough patients, or you have to expand your inclusion exclusion criteria just to get enough participants for FDA regulations. So we help clinical trial of sponsors and CROs actually plan this up front. So we do simulations to understand where the boundaries are in terms of your enrollment trajectory and where that could be violated. Another one would be product. Looking at products, a lot of digital health products are subject to static thresholds, and that means false alerts a lot of times because their patient demographic is based off population averages rather than contextual and personalized averages. So I apply my own boundary learning framework and work with digital health companies in
Ah,
partnership to actually license it so that they can actually improve their product to learn those boundaries that are more personalized and contextual and appropriate.
wow. You just rattled those examples off. I bet you got in your head like dozens and dozens of
Well,
examples.
agentic AI is, of course, a major example. Reporting
Yeah.
automation and
Yeah.
improving and streamlining reports that are more contextual and personalized to the stakeholder. So you can interpret them. When you have reports, they're often impersonal. They are just abundant data, but not any context. So you're looking at prescriptive and predictive analytics applied to data so that you have better decision making. That's one other aspect of what we do is help contextualize and personalize the data so it becomes more predictive and prescriptive in nature. And then, of course, agentic AI, where our boundary learning approach is really critical because now you have AI that is given autonomy, but you need to know when that autonomy should go away, when you need to take away that autonomy, when you need to implement guardrails and safeguards and safety margins. You want really smooth control handover to a human versus something that could be abrupt and discontinuous, looking at mathematical frameworks on that.
That's fascinating. So let's talk about real quickly what kinds of companies should reach out to you, and then how do you engage with someone in the healthcare industry or someone in the life sciences area to start? What does that beginning conversation look like for you to start helping them?
There are fundamentally three types of companies that I typically work with. One is the healthcare institution that is struggling with high patient volumes and low staffing capacity. The other is, of course, product companies, which are dealing with digital health initiatives that are suffering from alert overwhelm. And then the third type, of course, is lab ops and clinical trials, where you're starting a new clinical trial, for instance,
Yeah.
and you need to plan out your recruitment strategies and enrollment strategies. So I help with the site selection using predictive and prescriptive analytics. So these are the three fundamental components. And then, of course, lab ops is where reducing turnaround times, which I did at Abbott,
Yeah.
benchmarking and actually saying your lab operates more like this lab versus just course metrics. I'm looking at what your actual intrinsic capabilities are and mapping to those.
And then what does that conversation look like when you start to help somebody?
Yeah, so the first step is really an AI readiness and boundary audit, essentially looking at where AI should be placed, where can it be placed and drive revenue while still respecting your compliance and regulatory limits and your financial limits. So understanding what your systems look like and also where your variability might be excessive and unstructured, such that AI, if it's introduced, it needs to be highly reliable versus low reliability requirements where AI is perfect for that situation.
That's a great idea. And you've told me about this already, obviously, but for the audience, I hear so much about data readiness. You see a lot of that going, but the AI readiness audit where you're looking at data is probably part of it,
Data
obviously.
systems and, of course, workflows. Workflows are critical. You're integrating AI into the workflow to improve something. We look at what you should improve and what you are overlooking in terms of what are your cognitive blind spots as far as those transitions.
That makes a lot of sense. So if you're out there and you're in these areas and you're thinking about AI, you should definitely give Amit a call or reach out to him on LinkedIn or on our site. There's a link to reach out to Amit and talk to him about your situation. And I know from talking to Amit, he's helped a lot of people just for those beginning conversations. We help them, give them some direction, and then they can decide if they want to pursue this audit, which really makes a lot of sense. All right, Amit, it's been great talking to you. I always learn something valuable when I talk to you. I can't wait for us to start doing our leadership briefings together. So happy to have you involved in the organization, and thanks for being here with me today.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm glad to be a part of it and looking forward to sharing my insights.